River of Tears. The Cowboy and the Apache Woman. She had been walking for so long that her feet no longer felt like her own. Each step landed without pain, not because it didn't hurt, but because her body had learned to go quiet. The land around her was wide and dry, stretching farther than the eye could see, and yet she felt smaller with every mile. People who passed her did not ask her name. Some did not even look at her face. They saw only what they wanted to see, a woman alone, belonging to no one. In earlier days, she had not been alone. She had a name that meant something, a name spoken by her mother when the sun rose, and by her father when the fire burned low at night. She had laughter around her, voices that knew her voice, hands that reached for her hand without fear. Those days were gone now, not erased from her memory, but pushed far back, like a dream she no longer dared to touch. Remembering took strength, and strength was something she had learned to save. The people who found her did not ask about her past. They decided it for her. They said her family was gone. They said her people were gone. They said she was the last. The word followed her like a shadow. The last Apache woman. It sounded final, like a door closing, like something broken beyond repair. She did not argue. She had learned that silence kept her safer than truth. She was taken to a small frontier settlement, a place made of wood, dust, and noise. Wagons creaked, animals cried out, and voices filled the air with sharp sounds she did not fully understand. Everything there felt rushed, as if no one stayed long enough to care. People came and went, trading, arguing, laughing, surviving. No one noticed how she stood slightly apart, shoulders drawn in, eyes lowered not from shame, but from caution. They gave her a name that was not hers. It was easier for them that way. Her real name belonged to her past, and the past made people uncomfortable. This new name was short, simple, and empty. It was written down in a ledger next to numbers and notes, as if she were an item that could be counted. Each time someone called her by that name, she felt something loosen inside her, as if a thread tying her to who she had been was slowly pulling free. She was not placed in a cell or locked room. That would have made things too obvious. Instead, she was told where to sit, where to sleep, when to stand. A rope rested loosely around her wrists at times, more a warning than a restraint. She understood its message clearly. You are not free to leave. Freedom, she realized, was not always taken by force. Sometimes it was taken by agreement, by silence, by the way everyone else behaved as if something wrong were normal. People talked around her, not to her. They spoke about her age, guessing because no one knew. They spoke about her strength, her ability to work, her usefulness. They never spoke about her fear, her loss, or the fact that she was still listening, still understanding more than they realized. She kept her face calm, her body still. She knew that showing emotion often invited trouble. At night, when the settlement grew quieter, she lay awake and watched the ceiling above her. The wood beams reminded her of tree branches back home, though the memory came softly, like a careful visitor. She remembered stories told by elders, stories about endurance, about people who survived not because they were the strongest, but because they learned when to bend. Those stories stayed with her now, guiding her through each careful breath. Word spread quietly that she would be sold. Not announced, not argued over, just accepted. It was spoken of the way people spoke of weather or crops, as something that happened whether anyone liked it or not. The sale was meant to settle a debt, to make things even. No one asked how a life could be measured that way. No one asked her what she wanted. She heard the whispers before she understood their meaning. The looks changed first. People lingered longer when passing by. Some spoke more freely, assuming she did not understand their words. Others avoided her altogether, as if her presence reminded them of something they preferred not to examine too closely. She noticed everything, storing each detail quietly inside herself. Despite everything, she did not cry. Tears felt too valuable to waste in a place where no one would respect them. Instead, she held herself the way she had been taught long ago, steady, aware, present. Her silence was not weakness. It was protection. It was the last thing she still owned. The day before the sale, she was washed and given cleaner clothes, not out of kindness, but preparation. Hands guided her roughly but not cruelly. Even this small mercy felt strange. As water ran over her skin, she closed her eyes and imagined a river from her past, cool and alive. For a moment, she almost felt human again. That evening, she sat outside as the sun lowered itself toward the horizon. The sky changed color slowly, as if taking its time, unaware of what the next day would bring. She watched birds move across the open space and wondered where they were going. Freedom, she thought, must feel like movement without permission. She did not know who would buy her. She did not know where she would be taken. She did not know if her silence would still protect her tomorrow. But somewhere deep inside, beneath fear and exhaustion, something remained unbroken. A quiet belief that she was still herself, no matter what name they gave her, no matter what price they placed on her existence. As night settled over the settlement, she lay down and stared into the dark. She did not pray in words. Instead, she breathed slowly and carefully, as if each breath was a promise to herself. She would survive this day and the next. She would remember who she was, even if no one else did. When sleep finally came, it was light and restless. Yet even then her body stayed ready, her spirit alert. Morning was coming, and with it a moment that would change everything, though she could not yet know how or by whom. Morning arrived without ceremony. The sun rose the same way it always did, slow and steady, as if it had no knowledge of what this day meant. The settlement woke up in pieces. Doors opened. Boots hit the dirt. Voices floated through the air, casual and careless. For most people, it was just another day of trade and talk. For her, it was a day she had been quietly preparing for, without knowing how. She was told to stand near the back of the trading post, not inside, not fully hidden, just placed where she could be seen when needed. A wooden wall pressed against her back, rough and warm from the early light. Her hands were folded in front of her, loose but watched. No one tied her now. They did not think it was necessary. Where would she go, they believed? Who would help her? People gathered slowly. There was no crowd at first, only small groups pretending they were there for other reasons. A man leaned against a post and talked about cattle prices. Another joked about the weather. A woman passed by and glanced at her once, then quickly looked away. Everyone knew why they were there, yet no one spoke of it directly. She studied faces quietly. Some held interest. Some held nothing at all. A few showed discomfort that they tried hard to hide. She wondered if any of them saw her as a person, or if they had already decided she was something else. The thought did not make her angry. Anger took energy. She saved her energy. A ledger was brought out and placed on a crate. Papers were smoothed, numbers checked. The men handling these things spoke softly, efficiently, as if arranging tools rather than lives. One of them cleared his throat and finally said what everyone had been waiting for. The sale would begin soon. His voice was flat, practiced. He did not look at her when he spoke. She felt the shift immediately. The air seemed tighter, heavier. Conversation slowed, then stopped. People turned their bodies slightly, forming a loose circle without meaning to. She stood still at the center of it all, though no one stood close enough to touch her. Distance made it easier, she realized. Distance allowed them to forget what they were doing. The first offer came quickly, almost too quickly, as if someone wanted it over with. A number was spoken aloud. It sounded small to her, though she did not know its true value. It was not the amount that mattered, but how easily it left the man's mouth. Another offer followed, then another. The numbers rose and fell, passed back and forth like a game. They talked about her strength again, her ability to work long hours, her quiet nature. Someone joked that she would not be trouble. Laughter followed, brief and uneasy. She kept her eyes lowered, not because she was told to, but because she chose to. Looking too closely at them would only make things harder. As the offers continued, she focused on small details to keep herself steady. The sound of a bird landing on the roof, the smell of dust and wood, the way the sunlight moved inch by inch across the ground. These things were real. They were hers. No one could take them away. She thought of her mother then, not clearly, but in fragments. A hand smoothing her hair, a voice humming low and steady. She remembered being told that life could change in a single moment, and that fear should not decide who you become. At the time, those words had seemed distant. Now they felt close, almost present. The bidding slowed. A few men dropped out, losing interest or deciding the price was no longer worth it. Some had only been curious from the start. Others were careful with their money. One man shook his head and stepped back, relieved, as if he had escaped something rather than missed out. She wondered who would remain. She wondered if the next place would be worse or better, or simply different. She did not imagine rescue. Hope like that could be dangerous. Instead, she imagined herself adapting, learning new rules, finding quiet ways to survive. She had done it before. She could do it again! A pause followed, longer than the others. The man with the ledger looked around, waiting. No one spoke. The price hung in the air, unanswered. For a brief moment she thought it might end there, that no one would claim her at all. The idea was strange and frightening in a different way. What happened to something no one wanted? Then a voice spoke from the edge of the group, calm, low, unhurried. A number was named, higher than the last, not rushed, not loud. Just stated. She did not look up, but she felt the change immediately. The circle shifted. Heads turned. The man who spoke stood slightly apart from the others. His clothes were worn but clean. Dust clung to his boots, not from town roads but from open land. He did not smile. He did not step forward. He simply waited, as if confident the moment would move toward him without effort. The ledger was checked again. The number was repeated. No one answered it. A few men exchanged looks. One shrugged. Another shook his head slowly. The silence stretched, then settled. The sale was finished. She felt no rush of emotion, no sharp break inside herself, only a quiet knowing that something had shifted, even if she did not yet understand how. The rope returned to her wrists, light and symbolic. The man who had spoken still did not approach her. He handed over payment without comment, his movements slow and deliberate. People began to drift away almost immediately. The moment had passed. Interest faded. Conversations resumed, softer at first then louder. Doubly, someone laughed again, more easily this time. The settlement returned to itself, unchanged by what had just occurred. She remained where she was, until told to move. When she finally looked up, her eyes met the man's for the first time. His gaze held no hunger, no pride, no excitement, only something unreadable, like deep water. He nodded once, not to her, but to the man with the ledger, then turned away. She followed when instructed, her steps measured and calm. Each footfall felt heavy, not with fear, but with uncertainty. She did not know where she was going, only that she was leaving this place behind. The trading post, the dust, the whispers, all of it began to fall away with each step. As they reached the edge of the settlement, she glanced back once. No one watched her go. No, one called out. The place that had held her without holding her at all already felt distant, like something she had passed through rather than lived in. Ahead of her stretched open land, wide and quiet. The man walked a few steps in front, still silent, still steady. She matched his pace without trying. Whatever came next would reveal itself in time. They traveled in silence for a long time. The sound of the settlement faded behind them, replaced by the steady rhythm of footsteps and the soft movement of air across the land. The rope around her wrists was still there, but it hung loose, almost forgotten. It was not pulling her forward or holding her back. It was simply present, like many things in her life had become. The man walked a few steps ahead, never rushing, never looking back to check if she followed. He seemed to trust that she would. That small, quiet trust felt unfamiliar. She kept pace easily, her body used to long distances and careful movement. The land opened wide around them, empty and calm. No walls, no voices. Just earth and sky meeting without argument. They reached a waiting horse and a simple wagon. The man untied the rope from her wrists without a word. The sudden freedom of her hands surprised her more than she expected. She flexed her fingers slowly, as if making sure they still belonged to her. He gestured toward the wagon, not sharply, not gently, just clearly. She climbed in and sat, keeping her posture upright, alert. As they moved forward, she studied him from where she sat. He handled the reins with ease, his movements steady and practiced. His face was quiet, lined by sun and time, not hardened, but settled. He did not speak to fill the silence, and she realized he did not seem uncomfortable with it. That alone set him apart from most people she had known. Hours passed. The land shifted slowly, hills rising and falling, dry grass bending in the breeze. She watched everything, the way shadows stretched, the way birds lifted and disappeared. These details grounded her, reminded her that the world still existed beyond fences and trading posts. She wondered why he had spoken up when others stayed quiet. She wondered why he had paid more than necessary. People always wanted something in return. Work, control, obedience. She prepared herself for these possibilities without panic. Preparation was not fear. It was survival. When they stopped to rest, he handed her water and food without ceremony. He placed them within her reach and stepped away, giving her space. She accepted them after a brief pause, her instincts urging caution, her body urging need. The food was simple but filling. She ate slowly, watching him from the corner of her eye. He did not watch her eat. He busied himself with the horse, checking its harness, smoothing its mane. When he finally sat, it was at a distance, his gaze on the land rather than on her. The silence between them felt different now. Less heavy, less watched. She spoke for the first time without being asked. Her voice was quiet, rough from lack of use. She said nothing more than a simple question, asking where they were going. The words felt strange on her tongue, like something borrowed. He turned his head slightly, surprised but not startled. He answered in the same calm tone he had used at the settlement. He named a place, not with pride or promise, just as a fact. A ranch. Open land, work, if she wanted it, or rest, or nothing at all. She did not respond right away. The idea of choice felt fragile, almost dangerous. Choice had been taken from her so many times that holding it again felt unreal. She nodded once, not as agreement, but as acknowledgement. They continued on. As the day moved forward, she noticed small things. He slowed when the ground grew rough. He adjusted the wagon so the sun did not sit directly in her eyes. He did not ask her questions. He did not tell her stories. He allowed the space between them to remain hers. As evening approached, they reached the ranch. It was modest, set far from town, surrounded by open land and low hills. A simple house. A barn. Fences that marked boundaries without feeling like cages. The quiet there was deep and steady. He helped her down from the wagon, careful not to touch her unless necessary. He showed her where water was, where she could rest. He pointed to a small room near the house, clean and empty, prepared but not claimed. He told her she could stay there if she wished. Then he did something she did not expect. He took the papers from his coat, the ones that marked ownership in the eyes of the law. He placed them in her hands. The weight of them surprised her. Paper should not have felt so heavy. He told her she was free. The words were simple. No speech, no explanation, just truth, offered without demand. He said she owed him nothing. Not work, not loyalty, not silence. He said she could leave at dawn or stay as long as she wished. He would not stop her. For a moment, she thought she had misunderstood. People did not speak like this. They did not act like this. Her mind searched for hidden meanings, for conditions unspoken, but his face remained unchanged. Calm. Certain. He turned away then, giving her privacy even in this moment. He walked back toward the house, without looking behind him. No waiting. No watching. She stood there as the light softened around her, papers held carefully in her hands. Freedom did not rush in like a wave. It came slowly, quietly, like breath returning after being held too long. She sat down on the step, unsure whether to laugh or cry, and chose instead to simply breathe. That night, she slept deeply for the first time in longer than she could remember. No doors locked, no voices nearby, just the sound of wind and distant animals moving through the dark. When she woke before dawn, she sat up quickly out of habit, then relaxed as memory returned. She rose and stepped outside. The land stretched open before her, wide and waiting. The rancher was already awake, moving quietly, beginning his day. He nodded once when he saw her, no questions in his eyes. She looked at the path leading away from the ranch. She could take it, she knew that now. The knowledge settled into her bones slowly, solid and real. She did not leave that morning. Not because she was trapped, but because she was choosing. And that choice, simple and quiet, marked the true beginning of something new. Days passed gently without commands or pressure. The ranch settled into a quiet rhythm, and she found herself learning it without being told. The morning light arrived softly over the land, and with it came the sound of animals stirring, wind brushing through dry grass, and distant birds calling to one another. Each sound felt like a reminder that life continued, steady and patient. The rancher did not give her rules. He did not tell her when to wake or where to go. He simply lived his days the way he always had, rising early, working with care, speaking little. Sometimes she watched him from a distance, noticing how he treated the land as something to cooperate with, not control. He repaired fences slowly, fed the animals without hurry, and rested when the sun grew too strong. There was no rush in him, no sharp edges. At first, she kept to herself. She stayed near the small room he had shown her, unsure how much space she was allowed to take. Even freedom, she learned, had to be understood. Old habits lingered. She listened more than she spoke. She moved carefully, always aware of where she was and where others were not. One morning she noticed a bucket left near the well. The water needed lifting. Without asking, she picked it up and carried it to where it belonged. The work felt familiar, grounding. When the rancher saw the filled bucket later, he nodded once. No surprise in his eyes, no expectation either.
That small response eased something inside her.
After that, she helped where she chose. Sometimes she fed the animals. Sometimes she cleaned tools. Other days she walked the land alone, learning its shape, its quiet paths. No one followed her. No one questioned her movements. Each step taken by choice strengthened something she thought had been lost forever. They spoke rarely, but when they did, the words mattered. He asked her once if she needed anything. She thought carefully before answering, then said no. It was true. What she needed could not be handed to her. It had to grow on its own. At night they ate simple meals, sometimes together, sometimes apart. Silence sat easily between them. It was not empty. It was respectful. She realized that he listened even when she did not speak. He noticed when she was tired, when she seemed restless. He adjusted without drawing attention to it, giving her space without distance. Weeks passed. The land changed subtly. The air cooled. Shadows stretched longer. She began to feel time again, not as something to endure, but something to live within. Memories returned slowly, no longer sharp enough to cut. She remembered songs, fragments of language, stories told by firelight. Sometimes she whispered them to herself while walking, letting them exist again without fear. People from town came occasionally to trade supplies. When they saw her, some recognized her. Their surprise showed in small ways: a pause, a second glance, a shift in posture. They said nothing. The rancher said nothing. He did not introduce her. He did not explain. Her presence did not require permission. Word traveled quietly, as it always did. People wondered why she was there. Some asked questions he did not answer. Others guessed. A few shook their heads, confused by kindness they could not measure or profit from. He let them wonder. One afternoon she sat with him near the fence, watching the sun lower itself slowly. She told him, in simple words, that she would leave someday, not as a threat, not as gratitude, just truth. He nodded again, accepting it as easily as he accepted everything else. He told her the land would remain open to her for as long as she wished. That night she thought about leaving. She imagined walking into the wide world with nothing but her name, her breath, and her choice. The idea no longer frightened her. It felt possible. It felt earned. She did not leave the next morning. Or the one after that. Instead, she continued living, learning who she could be without fear shaping every decision. She laughed once, suddenly, at something small and ordinary. The sound startled her. Then it stayed with her, warm and real. Seasons moved on. The ranch remained quiet. The man remained silent. She remained free. When she finally left, there was no announcement, no farewell speech. She packed lightly, carrying only what mattered. The rancher stood nearby, leaning against the fence. He did not ask where she was going. He did not tell her to return. He simply nodded, the same calm gesture that had marked every turning point between them. She walked away at her own pace, not looking back until the ranch faded into the land. It did not feel like an ending. It felt like proof. Years later, people would speak of the silent rancher and the woman who had passed through his life. The story would change depending on who told it. Some would make it larger than it was. Others would reduce it to rumor. But the truth remained simple. One person had chosen not to accept what everyone else had decided was normal. And because of that, another person had been allowed to choose her own path again. That choice echoed long after both were gone, carried quietly through time, steady and unbroken, like the land itself. Time moved forward the way it always does, quietly and without asking permission. The land changed hands, seasons folded into one another, and people came and went. The ranch remained for many years, steady and unchanged, sitting quietly between open hills and wide sky. The man who lived there continued his work as he always had, rising with the sun, tending to what needed care, speaking only when words truly mattered. He never spoke about the woman after she left, not because the memory faded, but because it did not belong to anyone else. When people asked him, he answered with short replies that gave them nothing to hold on to. He did not correct rumors or confirm guesses. Silence, he believed, was sometimes the most honest response. Those who knew him well noticed small changes. He seemed lighter somehow, not happier in a visible way, but settled. He worked with the same patience, yet there was a calm certainty in him, as if he had done one thing in his life that needed no explanation or defense. When he walked the land at dusk, he often paused at the fence line, looking out toward the open distance, not searching, just remembering. Far from the ranch, the woman continued her journey. She traveled slowly, choosing paths that felt right rather than fast. Sometimes she stayed with distant communities. Sometimes she lived alone for a while, working, learning, listening. She reclaimed her real name over time, speaking at first only to herself, then to those who earned the right to hear it. She did not tell her story often. When she did, she told it simply. Not as a tale of rescue, but as a moment of choice. She spoke about the land, the quiet, and the man who asked nothing of her. She made sure people understood that freedom had not been handed to her like a gift. It had been returned, respected, and left in her hands. As years passed, her presence shaped the places she stayed. She helped others when she could, not with grand gestures, but with patience and understanding. She listened deeply. She reminded people, sometimes without words, that dignity did not need permission to exist. Those who met her remembered her not for where she had come from, but for how she stood in the world, steady, aware, unbroken. The story traveled differently than either of them did. It moved through conversations, through half-remembered accounts and quiet retellings. Some said the rancher had acted out of kindness. Others said he had simply done what was right without thinking twice. A few doubted the story altogether. uncomfortable with the idea that someone could refuse a system so calmly. But the story stayed alive because it did not rely on drama. It relied on truth, on the idea that even in times shaped by cruelty and habit, a single choice could step outside what was expected. Years later, after the rancher passed away, the land was sold. New people walked the fields, repaired fences, built additions. They found nothing remarkable at first. No markers, no records explaining why the place held such quiet weight. Only an old fence near the edge of the property, worn smooth by time and weather. An elder from a nearby community once stood there and told the story to a child. Not with names, not with dates, just the heart of it. A woman was treated as something she was not. A man refused to agree. And because of that, a life changed direction. The child listened carefully and asked why more people had not done the same. The elder smiled sadly and said that doing nothing is often easier than doing what feels unfamiliar. The land continued to exist, indifferent yet witness to everything. Wind moved through grass. Birds crossed the sky. Footsteps came and went. The world did not pause for the story, but it carried it forward quietly, the way it carries all truths that matter. The woman lived long enough to see the world change in small ways. Not enough, perhaps, but enough to know that her survival had meaning beyond herself. When she grew old, she sat in the evenings and watched the sun lower itself just as she had on the ranch years before. The memory no longer carried pain. It carried gratitude, not toward one man alone, but toward the moment when her life had been returned to her hands. When she was gone, those who remembered her spoke of her strength. Not the strength of endurance alone, but the strength of choosing herself again and again. They said she walked through life as someone who knew her worth without needing to prove it. The rancher's name faded from records. The woman's name lived on in quiet spaces, spoken softly, respectfully. Neither became famous. Neither became legend in the grand sense. And that was perhaps the truest ending, because the story was never about attention. It was about a simple refusal to accept what everyone else had decided was normal. It was about the space created when one person steps aside and allows another to stand free.